The gates of Auschwitz swung open, swallowing thousands of women into a nightmare they could never escape. Stripped, starved, and subjected to unspeakable horrors, they endured punishments beyond human comprehension. Nazi doctors turned them into living experiments. Guards forced them into a fate worse than death. Their bodies were broken, but their spirits fought to survive. What really happened to the women inside these camps is more disturbing than history books dare to reveal. The horrors faced by women in Nazi concentration camps are some of the darkest and most harrowing chapters in human history, a story of unimaginable brutality and resilience. In this video, we take a deep and unflinching look at the horrific treatment women endured in the infamous Nazi concentration camps. From forced labor and starvation to medical experiments and sexual exploitation, the atrocities they faced were designed to dehumanize, break their spirits, and erase their identities. One of the most devastating stories of such torment comes from the horrors of the Auschwitz concentration camp during World War II. These women, many of whom were Jewish, were caught in the machinery of Nazi oppression, suffering in ways that defy description. Their stories of survival are both horrifying and inspiring, representing the unyielding strength of the human spirit despite the most extreme conditions. This video explores the terrible treatment of women at Auschwitz, shedding light on their suffering, which included forced labor, medical experimentation, and sexual exploitation, among other atrocities. The camp's creation and expansion. Auschwitz, located in occupied Poland, was the largest and most infamous Nazi concentration and extermination camp during the Holocaust. Initially, the camp was constructed in 1940 as a place of confinement for Polish political prisoners. However, in 1941, the Nazi regime expanded its reach with the implementation of the Final Solution, a horrifying plan designed to eradicate the Jewish population of Europe. This led to the construction of more facilities, including Auschwitz II Birkenau, which would become the epicenter of mass exterminations. Over the course of the war, the camp would claim the lives of over 1.1 million people, with 90% of the victims being Jews. One of the most notorious aspects of Auschwitz was its systematic and efficient method of mass murder. Victims were transported by train from all over Europe, arriving at the camp where they were subjected to a brutal selection process. Upon arrival, prisoners were forced to disembark and were separated by gender. Nazi doctors would decide their fates, sending the healthy to labor camps and those deemed weak or unfit to the gas chambers. Many of the women who survived the selection process would endure a life of unimaginable suffering. The life of female prisoners. Women, particularly Jewish women, faced specific forms of violence and degradation in the camp. They arrived under false pretenses, promised jobs and better living conditions, only to be met with the grim reality of forced labor, starvation, and relentless abuse. The arrival of the first group of women at Auschwitz in 1942 marked the beginning of a horrifying chapter for female prisoners, many of whom were mothers, daughters, and sisters. They were often separated from their families and subjected to unimaginable hardships, including malnutrition, forced labor, and physical abuse. Women were given a diet consisting of just a fraction of the necessary caloric intake, making survival almost impossible. Beyond the physical suffering, women at Auschwitz faced the constant threat of sexual exploitation. The infamous camp brothel, run by the SS, was one of the darkest chapters in the camp's history. Female prisoners were forced to work as prostitutes, servicing not only the German soldiers, but also fellow prisoners who had been coerced into participating in the Nazi scheme. This form of sexual violence was another tool of humiliation and control, designed to degrade and demoralize the women while reinforcing the Nazis' total control over their lives. Medical experiments and forced sterilization. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of the women's suffering at Auschwitz was the medical experimentation carried out by Nazi doctors. Led by figures like Dr. Josef Mengele and Dr. Karl Klauberg, these experiments were often grotesque and inhumane. Women were subjected to painful, unscientific procedures under the guise of medical research. Many women were chosen for sterilization experiments, a cruel program designed to eliminate the possibility of reproduction among certain groups, particularly the Jewish population. Dr. Klauberg's experiments involved injecting women with chemical irritants to block their fallopian tubes, causing immense pain and permanent damage. Some women were sterilized through invasive surgery without anesthesia, leaving them scarred for life. Additionally, the medical experiments conducted at Auschwitz were focused on understanding the human body's response to diseases such as malaria, typhus, and tuberculosis. Women were intentionally infected with these diseases and subjected to a series of agonizing experiments to test the effects of different treatments. Many women did not survive these experiments, and those who did often carried physical and psychological scars for the rest of their lives. The impact of forced prostitution. One of the darkest and most overlooked aspects of life for women at Auschwitz was the existence of the camp's brothel. This brothel was a unique form of exploitation in which female prisoners were forced to have sex with Nazi soldiers and other prisoners. They were subjected to medical exams and had to endure a lottery to determine which soldier would be their next client. Each woman was required to service multiple men a day in exchange for limited privileges, such as slightly better food and the illusion of better treatment. For many of these women, this forced prostitution was an unimaginable form of torture, further dehumanizing them. The brothel also served a more sinister purpose. It was believed that the Nazis wanted to reduce homosexual relations within the camp, so they sought to encourage heterosexual activity by forcing women to participate in these practices. The women who worked in the brothel were subjected to frequent physical and emotional abuse. They were often punished for becoming pregnant, as the Nazi regime viewed the births as a threat to the racial purity of the Aryan population. Women who became pregnant were often subjected to forced abortions, performed under horrific conditions by fellow prisoners, and their babies were killed or left to die. Survival and resilience. Despite the unimaginable horrors they faced, many women managed to survive the brutality of Auschwitz, though at great personal cost. Women like Charlotte Delbo, who had been part of the French resistance, found ways to endure the cruelty. Her poignant account of seeing fellow prisoners reduced to corpses, their lives extinguished by the relentless brutality of the Nazis, illustrates the immense emotional toll the experience took on survivors. Survival in the camp was not just about physical endurance, but about maintaining hope and resilience in the face of total despair. Women supported one another, often forming close-knit groups to provide emotional strength. The bonds they formed helped many survive, though their emotional scars remained long after the war ended. Liberation and aftermath. The liberation of Auschwitz by Soviet forces on January 27, 1945, marked the end of one of the darkest chapters in history. However, for the survivors, the liberation came too late for many. Thousands of prisoners, too weak and malnourished, died shortly after being freed. The condition of the survivors was devastating, physically emaciated, psychologically shattered, and deeply scarred by the horrors they had endured. In the aftermath of the war, survivors struggled to find their place in a world that could never fully comprehend the horrors they had lived through. Many women who had been subjected to forced prostitution or medical experiments were left with lifelong trauma. The physical scars, combined with the emotional toll of their experiences, made it difficult for many to rebuild their lives. The brutality women experienced in Auschwitz and other Nazi camps was part of a larger pattern of gendered violence that characterized the Holocaust. Women were disproportionately affected by the brutalities of the Nazis, as they were subjected to both physical and sexual violence. The treatment of women at Auschwitz represents one of the most extreme examples of how war and oppression can target gender as a means of control and humiliation. The horrors women faced during the Holocaust, particularly at Auschwitz, remain one of the most disturbing aspects of human history. From forced labor and starvation to medical experimentation and sexual exploitation, the suffering of women during this time is a testament to the depths of human cruelty. However, it is also a story of resilience and survival. Many women who endured these atrocities lived to tell their stories, ensuring that the memory of what happened at Auschwitz would never be forgotten. The legacy of these women, their strength in the face of unimaginable cruelty, and their ability to survive against all odds, is a testament to the indomitable human spirit. While we can never fully understand the depth of their suffering, their stories remain crucial in reminding us of the importance of remembering history and ensuring that such atrocities are never repeated. The stories of these women must never be forgotten. As we remember the unimaginable horrors they endured, let's ensure that the atrocities of the past are never repeated. Thank you for watching, and we hope you'll join us again to continue learning from history and honoring those who suffered and survived.